All right. We're live. We're set. All right, everybody. Welcome to the podcast once again. I'm your host, Jason Alamillo. I had a pretty good week releasing the first episodes of this podcast. And thank you to people who provided me feedback. One thing I do want to kind of address, it's nothing major. So I know people saw that I got animated in some of my podcasts last week. Just to kind of put that in perspective, I get animated only because I care about issues, and especially the political ones. And so if I'm kind of screaming into the podcast, it's not to annoy anybody. Just kind of know that I kind of can't control it, because that's the kind of person I am, and I'll do my best. But just kind of have that in mind. But anyway, can't wait to get started on this week's podcast. So let's go. So last weekend, or this past weekend, I never know what to call it. It's always like, oh, last weekend, this weekend, what'd you do this last weekend? I don't know. Anyway, last weekend I was on the No Nonsense podcast. It's a brand new podcast with my two good friends, Naime, Hawa, and Oscar Montiel. Oscar Josue Montiel. I think I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, Oscar will correct me. I know he will. So, just a little bit about me. I major in communication studies, and I minor in journalism. So they brought me on to talk about technology because I'm passionate about it, and journalism. And there was a part of the podcast I really wanted to talk about. It's about this theory of the Wild Wild West. If you don't know what the Wild Wild West is, it's basically you basically have the Wild Wild West is people being free, doing whatever they want. I think of it as the old cowboys. The old cowboys, I'll get your horse, boy, and I'll make you regret it. I'm your master. Sounds like George W. Bush, right? And there's no rules, there's no laws, there's no regulations, there's no oversight, there's no people telling you what to do, what not to do. So it's kind of this notion of just being free and being able to do what you want. Well, so we were talking about technology, and this kind of came up in terms of, should it be a Wild Wild West on the internet? As we know, it's already a free public domain. Tim Berners-Lee in the 1990s said, hey, I'm not going to charge, even though I created the World Wide Web. Fun fact for y'all. Journalism fun facts. So Naime, in this clip, argues for a Wild Wild West, in which we're allowed to post whatever we want, which I agree with. And we shouldn't have any fact checks. We shouldn't have any Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or Tumblr, if that even still exists, or Kick, if that even exists, or any social media, right? Any social media sites, they shouldn't take our posts down. YouTube, they shouldn't demonetize us. They shouldn't, which I agree with, right or left. They shouldn't do any of that, right? So the basic premise is that, but so it's us having the freedom of expression and expressing ourselves however we want, and companies that aren't publishers taking our posts down or flagging our posts or anything like that, right? And my friend Naime argued for the two alternatives. So basically the reason we talked about this is we talked about companies who sell our data, right? If you get an Amazon Echo, you have Alexa, she's always listening to you. She's never really off. Right. So if you're sitting around talking to your friends about technology, food, shoes, watches, jewelry, whatever it is, right? I know that watches are jewelry, but Under Armour, gym clothes, whatever, that Amazon Echo is listening to you. And then it transfers all that info to Google and to Amazon, because it's their product. And then Amazon starts saying, hey, we've got some good old sports gear you're gonna like, And then you have companies that, like Facebook, they sell your data to data collecting agencies, and then those data collecting agencies can do whatever the heck they want, either give it to advertisers or give it to hackers or whatever. And a lot of people now use incognito mode on their browsers, which takes your browser private. They install antivirus softwares, right? Because you have to. And then they install military-grade encryption on their phones, their iPads, or any other tablet or computers or whatever, right? And so, because we don't want companies taking our information and going haywire with it. Now, Naime kind of argues here in this clip, like, we should have a Wild Wild West, and it should be, let's try it. There should be the two alternatives of Facebook, where you pay a subscription, and then they don't sell your data, and I make some arguments about it. And I thought I would share the clip because it got a little heated. Not in a way that, oh my God, look, they're getting heated. Oh, wow, right? None of that. No. Not at all. It's more, we had a difference of opinion and we agreed on some parts, but I thought I would play the clip for you. And I might stop it here and there, or I might just play through. We never know. It is a podcast. I'm not, I don't have any corporate oversight, so thank God. And I thought I would play the clip and let's see what is said and my thoughts on the Wild Wild West on this podcast. My take on the Wild Wild West. Internet's already a public domain. What people are trying to say here is, look, man, we don't mind that it's a public domain. It's fine. Don't have Twitter fact check. I understand all your points, but people don't just go get a cybersecurity degree or become AT instructors and then teach their AT students how to keep their things private for nothing. The world is malicious. Data can be used in a malicious way. And
yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
And if you're going to get the Wild Wild West, okay, fine. But that means that for those
anything
of us that
goes.
do care about privacy, anything goes. Exactly. And that means that this podcast, YouTube could, someone could come in and hack the data that Oscar's using to record, hack his passwords. It's all compromised, like our data is now, right? But the reason that I argue for regulation is not telling the corporations exactly what to do, but saying, look, you can't be giving away people's private information. That's it. Now, yeah, the Wild Wild West you're talking about is let people post what they want to post. That's the Wild Wild West you're arguing, which is true.
Yeah.
That's fine. I argue the same thing, right? But no matter what we post, it shouldn't be our responsibility to ensure that there are no cyber attacks on our computers and our data, right? And that's
I'm
why
not disagreeing with that either, though. I never implied that we shouldn't have protections. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, but if you're saying let it be a Wild Wild West, not only are you saying, hey, let us post whatever we want to post, don't fact check us, but if it's really a Wild Wild West, that means that any company, Target, Walmart, ExxonMobil, Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, whoever, they can just get our data, do whatever they want with it. Yep. You can't go sue them if you get hurt, if you get killed, if you lose your job over it. You can't go sue them because, hey, it's a Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
So there we go, right? So my argument is, hey, look, you want a Wild Wild West? That's great. But just realize a Wild Wild West is double-sided, and you're going to hear me in the clip use the phrase double-edged sword. Is like, okay, fine, I'll let you post whatever you want, but I also get to sell your data. No rules, no regulations, no nothing, right? That's in turn what the Wild Wild West is. That's what it is. And we already know what companies do. They track your license plate. They find out who your associates are, who you associate with, where your friends live, what kind of car they drive, who's in their family, how many are in your household, what devices do you have. it's a scary, scary thing, right? And that's essentially what I'm saying is don't complain if all of a sudden now you're in trouble with the law. Now you're injured. Now whatever. I'm not saying that it's always going to happen, but I mean, come on, we've got a surveillance state in this country where you've essentially got people just spying on you for no real reason, and they lie to us. Oh, it's for terrorism. Oh, it's for, I don't know, threats to national security, and all of a sudden you're spying on Americans. Here we go.
But that environment is anything goes. Like, you chose to post it. You knew you were going to post, and you used that wild west platform, meaning you can't touch us because you made that one decision.
So can we not launch an experiment where they have two versions and see which one succeeds more? Like I said, there'd be two versions of Twitter, or there'd be two versions of Facebook. The Facebook where it's subscription based, where I buy my space on Facebook instead of Facebook selling my data, and we see which one wins out. And as is the rules of capitalism, the one who wins survives, and the one who loses, survival of the fittest type thing. And then that's the method that's used. I just think
remember cost, man. Because let's be honest, and be honest with me, man. You being a cheapskate, are you willing to? Are you willing to do that?
I am not.
Put yourself in other people's shoes as well.
Yeah, no, I am not willing to do that. But I'm also telling you, I'm not concerned about my data being bought and sold. I don't mind my data being bought and sold. The only one I don't want touching my data is the surveillance state in China.
So before I let that continue, because it gets heated right here. Woo! It gets heated, man. Real heated. Like, ooh. I didn't really realize it when we were filming it, but I listened to it last night. I was on the phone with someone and I hung up and I'm like, whoa! I was like, whoa, that's heated. But, so he's arguing, how about you subscribe to Facebook? You subscribe to Twitter. Right? And so, in a sense, I'm giving Twitter and Facebook money. Twitter and Facebook can't sell my data. They can't. You can't sell it to data collecting agencies. You can't sell it to the government. You can't sell it to law enforcement. You can't sell it to other social media companies in Silicon Valley. You can't sell it to Microsoft in Seattle. You can't sell it, or wherever Microsoft is. I might be wrong. You can't sell it to Amazon in Virginia or Seattle. You can't give it to the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, New York Times. You can't do any of that. Can't give it to advertisers like Nike, like Walmart, like Target, makeup and beauty brands and all that, right? And sports brands. And I mean, Oscar brings up a good point, which is look at the cost, right? You look at the average American, they're not going to want to pay $9.95, $9.99, whatever he was offering, or $5. Look, you do pay for a cup of coffee at Starbucks, Dutch Bros, Coffee Bean, Roma Coffee, your local store that sells it, right? You pay for Spotify, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, I don't know, whatever you buy, right? But the majority of people who listen to those kinds of things, and even Pandora and iHeartRadio, they're not, they don't really buy the product because they're like, I got other costs. I've got rent. I need to save. I want to send my kid to college. Now, as you said, or as you heard, Naime said, I don't want my data being sold to China, to, anyone else. And here's exactly where it gets heated. And this was my reply to him.
But that's who gets your data.
That's why you should care. Is because Facebook sells to these data collecting agencies that are not only based here in the U.S. A lot of them are going to sell it to Huawei and other Chinese executive companies that, because corporations over there are tied to the Chinese government. That's why you should care about your data.
Okay, but that's where we put legislation in place where we say,
then it's
hey,
not
these
the
guys
Wild
are
Wild
our
West.
allies. You can't be selling to our allies, to our
but
adversaries.
But you're wanting a Wild Wild West. A Wild Wild West not only is us posting whatever we want, but the Wild Wild West is also letting companies run rampant. And that's exactly what's going on. So if you want a Wild Wild West, it's a double-edged sword.
There's the alternative avenue. There's the alternative, of hey, for those, okay, I don't want China to access my data. Then I will have to pay the $9.95 a month and be fine with it. I will have to pay the $9.95 a month and be fine with it. And I'm paying for that to make sure China doesn't get my data. You see what I mean? I'm making the choice. There are both avenues, both alternatives available.
So I agree with that. But then you give them your credit card information, your debit card info, your bank account, your savings. Your American Express card. And they can say, and this is what I'll bring up, oh, we won't sell your data, but then, okay, they don't sell your data, but what about the TV you're watching? As I think it was Julian Assange had leaked from WikiLeaks, the CIA uses our television to take photos of us. So it makes, again, that's the U.S. government lying to us. We're going to do this, for America. We need to protect our national security. No, you're spying on us for no freaking reason. And as I had mentioned before, that's what the wild west is. And what what we didn't focus on is, we focused on social media. But what about the camera you put in your house so that you can tell if anybody robs your house? A lot of companies, especially when you're using any home app except Apple, because Apple's all about privacy, they're wanting to sell your data. Sure, they're selling you the hardware, but they also want to sell some software, and that software is all the goods about your data. Again, who are your associates? Who stops by? What kind of mail do you get? What time do you get home? What time do you leave home? What do you do in your house? If law enforcement's after you, all they have to do is go to that company, and that company's like, well, we do sell the data. Go to this company. And then they'll go to the company that they sold the data to, and all of a sudden, the law enforcement already has your data. And again, a lot of Americans aren't going to want to pay the subscription, because now you're going to argue, okay, well, now companies are going to start charging for subscriptions to watch your TV, to have that camera. Sure, and you could.
I'll have to decide whether I want the Wild Wild West or whether I want the subscription-based monthly service.
Right, but even as a subscription monthly-based service, they can still sell your data. They'll say, "Hey, we won't sell your data." No. That's the thing. Is they can say that.
To propose. No. I'm trying to propose. If you're taking money from the client, it's because the client don't want their data sold. Period. So you can't be taking money from me.
But then,
that's what I'm saying. Legislation should be put in place for something like that.
Yeah, but then it can't be a wild west, because what if someone doesn't want their information sold, but they also don't want to have to pay to use for you not to have their information sold? I see where you're going. I got it. Mm-hmm. You could have that alternative, but at the same time, what if they say, okay, fine, but we're not going to let you see your friends' posts. Okay, fine, but we're not going to have your posts go everywhere like it normally does. Then you have companies playing their little games, and because they're a private corporation, the government's not going to intervene, because those corporations are giving that money that you give to the politicians, and they're saying, hey, even though we're not going to be able to sell their data, let's not let their posts be seen. So when you go to your friend's house, and you say, hey, Naime, did you see my post about the real estate thing? What post about the real estate thing? No, I posted it. Are you sure? Yeah, let me go on your phone and check. And all of a sudden, it's not there, but it is on mine. again, you can do that. That's totally fine. And you can have that alternative where they don't sell your data and you pay a monthly subscription, but then they start effing with your data all over again. And
But that's where capitalism proves its beauty. And
so again, there you go. Is companies always find a way to mess with us. They always find a way, okay, fine, I can't discriminate against you and fire you because you're gay, you're lesbian, you're trans, you're queer, you're bisexual, you're pansexual, you're whatever. Fine. I'll say that, I don't know, he wasn't qualified. I had another person who really met the mark. And it might not be true. You might have the right qualification. If you're trying to be an editor for Halliburton and Halliburton says, okay, well, we can't actually fire them for being gay now. The person we had 5 more years experience. The other person that applied for the position. And sometimes that is true, but or Kohl's or Starbucks or whoever, they can still lie about that. What if that person had a year experience, you had 10? And if it's a wild, wild west, my argument to Naime is, okay, well then why have legislation? You're arguing for a wild, wild west. Wild, wild west. Let people be rampant. Let social media companies be rampant. Let them do whatever the hell they want. Let private corporations do whatever the hell they want. But then, let's put legislation in place so they don't sell our data and they don't play games while we subscribe to their things. Then it's not a wild, wild west. You could have the two alternatives, sure, but the whole theory of wild, wild west is, hey, you can sell my data. I don't care. I'm an average Joe. I don't give a F. That's fine. And I don't want to, I know I don't want you to sell my data, but it's fine. But I also don't want you to demonetize me. I also don't want you to take my posts down, flag my posts, fact check my post, any of that. Any of my posts. And what he's arguing is, well, people can decide between, okay, hey, I'll take the alternative where you don't do any of that. You don't sell my data, you don't demonetize me, take down my posts, fact check, flag, flagship, all of them. So you don't do that. Or now just take the wild, wild west option. So I was confused because he was arguing wild, wild west all the way, but then we should have legislation. Maybe a little bit of regulation. And look, I'm not trying to laugh and mock Naime or anything, but I'm just kind of like, after watching the podcast when it came out, I'm like, wait, hold on a second. Wait, that's weird. So now he's going to get into the beauty of capitalism and China and Apple. And let's just go there. Let's go.
capitalism is not a beautiful structure at all in the wildest sense of the imagination. But in this regard, that's where capitalism is going to prove its beauty, and we'll see who wins out. Let's say they try to block me and I'm paying that monthly subscription. Well, guess what? They lost not only my monthly subscription, but I don't want my data sold, so I'm not going to use Facebook at all. I'm not going to use these social media outlets at all, period. And then they're going to end up losing customers. They're going to end up losing a customer base. So they're going to be forced to evolve. They're going to be forced to reform. They're going to be forced to adjust. And then when we have a situation like that, they're going to correct themselves because they have no choice, because they're losing business. They're losing customers. They're losing people who are consuming their services. And I hate to break it to you, social media is beautiful, and social media has become such an important and integral part of our lives these days, but it's not essential. And if folks realize, hey, I have two options, either my data being bought and sold like a fish, or I have to pay a monthly subscription for a premium service where my data is not bought and sold, they'll make the decision. And let's say they decide that.
Before I let them continue, I know I'm letting it stop in the middle. Yeah, no, I mean that right there I can just tell you I don't agree. And that's fine. You know, Naim's gonna not agree with me on that. Let's just continue.
They want that premium service, and if that premium service does not live up to their expectations, one, they'll probably complain to corporate and ask them why they're not living up to their expectations. And if corporate doesn't correct the problem en masse, if corporate doesn't correct the problem altogether, if corporate doesn't correct the problem in a collective sense, then they will just end up stop consuming the products. Why do you think Apple continues to manufacture and produce in China, for example? They're continuing to do that because people enjoy the low prices. They know if they bump up the prices, they're going to lose business. So that's why they keep on doing something like that. But people need to be more aware that jobs are being taken away from them and sent and shipped off to China because of Apple and because of the greed of capitalism. But what I'm saying is capitalism also has a beauty of forcing businesses to evolve when they have to, forcing businesses to reform when they have to, forcing businesses to adjust when they have to. And this is the only time you're going to hear me praising capitalism, because I rarely ever do so, and I don't support it as a principal theory of economics and wealth.
So what he's arguing there, so what I disagreed with, social media is not essential. In a way, you could argue that. Like, hey, you know what? It's not essential. Forget about it. But then you have companies that use social media. These days, you know, back in the 70s and the 80s, you didn't have Twitter where companies could market any time of the day. Artists couldn't just drop an album and then put the link to Apple Music and Amazon Prime Music and all of that at midnight, and then everybody could just go look at it. Corporations need social media. That is what's keeping them alive today, because nobody's really using a CD player in their room. Nobody's reading the newspaper anymore. Nobody's sitting down, and, you know, a lot of younger people are not sitting down and watching the 6 o'clock news. It's just not happening. So when I hear, oh, social media is not essential, it is. And I can argue it is essential for disaster relief. You know, hey, stay away from these areas. Make sure you evacuate. Here's coronavirus relief stats. The world is on social media. It has become the it thing. It has become the platform of the century where people need to post to get their business out there. You have a missing persons report. Your dog is missing. That's what I think is essential. And then he gets into, well, hey, people like their iPhones because, and mind you, that's just noise from another apartment. I am working from home because of the coronavirus. People are ordering their iPhones. Yes, he has a point. Hey, our phones are being made in China. Labor is cheaper because you can pay people $1 there. And you know, Apple's got a lot of controversy, which we can talk about how they're paying people cheap labor. And they go to the Cayman Islands, they go to Switzerland and the Netherlands, and they go to everywhere else and China to pay low taxes. Even though they've got what? They're worth over $1 trillion. They're worth over $1 trillion. They can pay that. But so what he's saying is, hey, your iPhone that you enjoy so much, your iPad, your Mac, your watch, your Apple TV, your iPod Touch, your HomePod, all of that is being made in China. And that's making the prices cheaper. Sure, you could argue that. Although these days, phone companies who, like, for example, I think Samsung makes their phones in South Korea, Apple makes them in China, you know, they're still raising their prices. I think my phone was like $1,216 or something like that. Other phones are about $1,300, $1,600, depending on if you max it out or not. So yeah, our phones would probably be more expensive. But I'd rather pay a little bit more if that means that people are being paid $12 an hour in their area. Really, I think we need a $15 minimum wage, but that's just me, right? If they're being paid $15 an hour, Apple doesn't technically need to spike their prices. You know, they're already going to do that, regardless if they're in China or not. And by the way, even if they're not in China, people are if they don't have insurance on their Mac, they're taking their Mac to get fixed. And, it could be like, oh my God, just this part of the display was not working. And they're saying it's the whole battery, it's the whole motherboard, it's the whole thing. See this red thing here? It's really, really expensive. It'll cost about $3,000 to fix. You might as well just buy a new Mac. That's Apple practices that they're now in trouble with. They're now in Canada having to fight politicians because they're horrible at doing business practices and charging customers a crap load of money. There's me getting animated again. But, you get my point, is they're doing it anyway. These corporations don't know what greed, they don't know what it's like to be without greed. They don't know what it's like. You take their retail people, they're making, $16,000, $20,000 a year? And that's more than the average retail store, so you got to give them credit. But, come on. You can't pay them more? What's Steve Wozniak's net worth? $10 million? How about Tim Cook? $800 million? $1 billion? Steve Jobs, when he died, 10, 11 billion? Granted, not only from Apple, but he had Pixar too, and other subsidiary companies. But you get my point. That's still going to happen. So capitalism is a failed system, but most Americans support it because they don't know the freaking difference. They actually don't know the difference, and so that's why people go with oh my God, people don't support capitalism? Yeah, well, it's a effed up system. It's horrible. We've got over, 100,000 veterans sleeping on the street, 500,000 people going bankrupt because of medical debt, 87 million people uninsured or underinsured, 68,000 people, die because they don't have health care every year? Between 35 to 68,000 people? Healthcare premiums are up the roof. We have co-payments. We have deductibles. Out-of-pocket expenses. And drug costs up the roof. People are being denied loans. Houses are going up and up and up in price. Areas like New York City are being hiked in price. You get a one-bedroom apartment for $3,000 and right near Central Park. And you're still saying, well, capitalism needs to prove its beauty? Well, let's see if companies will pass or fail. Well, guess what? Facebook, the reason they're not going to do a subscription service is because none of us would really pay that. And those that do, it's not going to be enough for them. They're actually still going to need to sell our data, because it's not like, okay, if Facebook makes over $100 billion a year, right? I don't know Facebook's net worth or worth as a company, gross income, whatever. If the data collection adds up to $300, $500 billion a year for them in revenue and profit, well, guess what? You think that subscription services are going to add up to that? No way, Jose. Never. It's not going to happen. Not at all. It's never going to happen. How can you expect for someone to just go, oh, okay. It's just not going to happen. So that is, that's my take on that clip. We're going to begin this podcast with technology, and I know this is a very long clip, but I thought I'd make it. And go check out the No Nonsense podcast. I'll put the link in the description below. This is going on YouTube mainly. It's not on Spotify or Apple Music or Anchor or wherever podcasts are hosted these days. But that's how we're going to begin our podcast this week. Me going on a rant about technology and privacy and capitalism. And we'll continue on with politics. And alrighty. And it's going to be a good week. Very good week.